The enhanced for loop. In this video, we will demonstrate how to write enhanced for loops. Consider the following array of integers. Suppose I want to iterate through this array. As has been demonstrated in previous videos, the way to do that would be with the for loop, where we initialize the loop variable to 0, set the number of loops equal to the length of the array, and then increment the loop variable by 1 every single time. Then, suppose my goal was just to print out each value in the array separated by a space. Well then, inside the for loop, I'll type a system.out.print statement where I use the loop variable as an index for nums, and then I put a space after it, thus giving me each value in the array printed out in order from beginning to end. Because iterating through an array is such a common task in Java, Java provides us a shortcut for doing that with the enhanced for loop. So what would an enhanced for loop look like? Well, once again, it starts off with the word for. Then we declare our loop variable as an int, but not for the same reason that we declared it as an int in the original for loop. In the original for loop, we declared our loop variable as an int because we were using it as an index. For the enhanced for loop, we declare it as an int because that's the type of value that our array is storing. The loop variable for an enhanced for loop has to match the data type that your array is storing. So if we're iterating through an array of strings, then our loop variable would be of type string. If we were iterating through an array of booleans, then our data type would be of type boolean. If we were iterating through an array of characters, then our loop variable would be a character type, a char type, so on and so forth. So for our enhanced for loop, since we're iterating through an array of integers, our loop variable will be of type int, and in this case, we'll simply call it I. That's the name we'll use for it. The reason loop variables are created this way for the enhanced for loop is because the enhanced for loop variable stores the actual element, not the index of the element. Also notice that I don't initialize the variable to any specific value. I don't give it a starting point or an end point. That's because with an enhanced for loop, it's already assuming that we are starting at the first element and stopping at the last element. That's already assumed, so we don't need to outright specify that. The only thing else we need to add to this header is a colon and the name of the array that we're trying to iterate through, which in this case is nums. Then inside the for loop, if once again my goal is to print out each value in the array separated by a space, I would once again simply use a print statement, and I'm simply going to print out the I variable followed by a space. Once again, notice that instead of typing nums bracket I simply typed I, because with an enhanced for loop, the loop variable is not the index of the element. The loop variable is the actual element itself. Thus, when we execute this for loop, well, before I execute it, let me first insert an empty println statement in between the two for loops. This is just to drop the cursor down so that all my code won't be on just one line. And now, when I execute this code, that second for loop, the enhanced for loop, I get the exact same output as the original for loop, because once again, the I value in the enhanced for loop is storing the actual value, not the index. That all being said, suppose I declare an array list of integers containing the same exact values as the array we just worked with. The exact same enhanced for loop that we used for the previous array could also be used on this array list. And when we execute it, we'll get the exact same output. In general, enhanced for loops can be used for any list or container in Java. Enhanced for loops can also be used for matrices. However, if you're going to use an enhanced for loop to iterate through a matrix, just know that you can only iterate it in row major order. You cannot iterate through a matrix in column major order using an enhanced for loop. So, what would the enhanced double for loop look like? Well, once again, since we're going in row major order, the outer for loop will be for iterating through each row. What's the data type for a row in this matrix? An array of integers. So we're going to type int double brackets because once again, that's the data type for a single row in a matrix. Then for the name, we'll simply call it row, since that's the name that would make most sense to refer to each row in the matrix. Then on the other side of the colon, we're going to type the name of the matrix that we're trying to iterate through. And that would be our outer for loop. Then the inner for loop will be for iterating through each individual row. Whoa, what's the data type for each value in the row? an int. So for the inner for loop, our data type would be int. And for the name, we'll simply give it I, just as we would if we were simply iterating through an individual array. Then, on the other side of the colon, we'll type the name of the row, since that's the name we gave to each row in our outer for loop. Then, inside our nested for loop, if our goal is just to print out each value in the matrix on its own line, we'd simply type system.out.println and the variable I. Once again, all we would type is I because I contains the actual element, not the index of the element. When we execute this code, we get all of the values of the matrix printed out in row major order.